So I'll take you through what I've done here. Taking the block, after, now in my case, I sanded down that angle because I had already had another piece to use to clamp against it. If you don't keep the piece, it's not a big panic. You can still shim it up to clamp it. Now, then, keep in mind we've got a square side on here and the angled side like this, with the low side here. And this is where the neck's going to attach on the guitar. So the tenon from the neck is going to fit into a slot here. So I've cut this slot in, and it's 3/4 of an inch wide to match the tenon, and about an inch deep. You're going to keep in mind the tenon theoretically is 15/16 deep. So we made this one inch to make it just a little bit longer, because you don't want the tenon to bang on the back of the thing, or else you won't get a tight fit. So you want this a little deeper than your tenon. I just run this through on the table saw to make that cut. The other thing we need to do, because this is upside down, this is the top of the guitar and this is the back of the guitar. The truss rod access hole needs to come through here to get through into where the truss rod is going to stick through. And here I'm using the table saw again to cut out a 5/8 wide slot that's 7/8 of an inch deep, and that'll give us room to access the truss rod through here. The last thing I'm going to do with it before we glue it on is I'm just going to round the corners, the inside corners over, because you will see this through the sound hole of the guitar. So you want this to look decent, because after sanding the whole soundboard down to 220, you don't want to, put this raw hunk of wood inside there for everybody to see. The first thing they're going to see. So give it a little cosmetic treatment. Okay, so now I've taken the head block and I've drilled a couple holes in it, because we're going to use these bolts eventually to hold the neck on, and they go in here like so. And the holes you drill for these things, make them a little bit sloppy, because when it comes time to align that neck, you're going to be happy to have a little bit of play in that to get this lined up in the nut. So drill those holes in there, and just try and space them out relatively, kind of as far apart as you can get them without getting too close to the edge. They might split split anything, or especially the nuts that go into the head, into the neck, won't split it either. So that's going to get glued on, flat side down, with the truss rod access down on the soundboard, like that. There we go, and aligned as accurately as you can possibly get it to that line you drew for where it's going to go. That's not enough. That's too much. I go with a few more paper towels. There we go. Alright. Now, get this positioned like so, and it slides around, so push it down with your fingers. So it'll start to grab. Now if the glue squeezes out and starts to obscure your line, just take a chisel. Just take a chisel. You'd think there'd be a chisel sitting right here. Just take a chisel and wipe it off. Keep that centered and squared. So things start to grab here. Then take that angle piece we kept, and all you're going to need is one clamp on this. I gotta love it when the guy says you only need one clamp on this, and then he turns around and puts a second clamp on. Now, sometimes it's easier to keep it from moving if you got the clamps balanced on the two sides. Now you'll find it will adjust itself a little bit. Just coax it back in place. Get the clamps back on, and you kind of nurse this one. You do not want this one drawing crooked. You also have a guitar you can play around corners with. This will align everything else with the neck. You don't need a ton of pressure on this. I think it is stabilized. Once the head block is completed, we can make the heel block. Now this is the piece of mahogany we cut off, sorry, the tail block. This is the piece of mahogany we cut off the tail block piece we had for the neck set. And this goes at the back, at the tail of the guitar, to where the two sides come around and join. Now, there's a fair amount of controversy over which way the grain should run in the tail block of a guitar. Some people say it should run up and down. The benefit of there is it stops if the guitar falls and lands on the end pin. You can get cracks. It will run right through both sides like this, and this will tend to stop that from happening. Adds better strength that way. Other arguments say the grain should run this way. For one thing, this grain now in the same direction as the sides are, which when you have swelling and contracting of the wood, the end block will swell and contract along with the sides, and there'll be no danger of cracking there, or less danger of cracking. The other thing is by putting it, aligning the grain this way, when you come to planing down the sides to put the back on, it's much easier to plane side grain like this than it is to try and plane end grain. Having said all that, if you use the cutoff from the tail block that we used from the neck set, the grain is going to have to run this way because it's not long enough to run it this way. Anyway, there's a lot of heated discussion. You may make whatever decision you want, but mine's going to be installed this way. Now, on the steel string guitar, it needs to be 3/4 of an inch thick, and this material we have cut off here is a little thicker than that. So I've just taken my marker and gone around and marked a 3/4 inch line all the way around it, and I'm going to take it to the handy dandy bench sander to take that down to thickness.